Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Securing Bridges podcast. You're about to join Alyssa Miller as she sits down with senior and executive security leaders to share stories of success and failure while working across business teams. It's time to build and secure the bridge to the business. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
I need to recharge once in a while, and so I'm recharging even more this week because I'm up here in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. You notice these are my things. So little bit. Oh boy, I'm gonna give you a fair warning as you have already noticed. We might have some glitches as we go because northern Wisconsin, there's not a lot of infrastructure here. It's been a little while, but I think we've got enough paper clips and duct tape going. We should be able to keep the show going. If not, you know what? We'll see where this goes. But hey, I'm excited to be back here. It's so good to see all of you tuning in once again. This is Securing Bridges, where we talk about that, building that bridge between cybersecurity and the folks who maybe aren't the best cybersecurity experts in the room. And we've had just that laundry list of great guests, first of all. And this week's, once again, we have yet another incredible guest. I can't even believe this. I can't believe it took so long to get this next guest on the show. So, and that's my fault. Let's be clear. I didn't ask her until very recently, but here she is. Some of you might know her as Gabrielle Hempel. Some of you might know her as Gabby, but I'm betting most of you know her as Gab Smash. Gabby, how are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm up here in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, at a spa resort. So it's been a good week for me. But
sounds like a good week.
It is a good week. I highly recommend to anyone spend your week this way. But hey, you know what? Maybe a few people out there are hiding under their stones and don't know who you are. So please go ahead and let's kick things off. Just introduce yourself to our guests.
Yeah, so I'm Gabrielle. I am in cybersecurity now for, I guess, almost 4 years, which is really crazy because it doesn't feel like almost 4 years. But started out actually in neuroscience and genetic science, doing pharmaceutical regulation and things like that, and then made my way over to cybersecurity via medical devices. I was really curious, was working one day, kept getting some alerts about medical device vulnerabilities, and I, knowing nothing about cybersecurity, was sitting there like, okay, who's trying to hack these medical devices? Like, what is going on? And that was kind of the rabbit hole that found me falling into security. So since then, I've worked as a security analyst. I've worked as a cloud engineer, so kind of got my feet wet in the cloud environment. And now I'm a systems engineer with NetFitness. So doing a lot of fun stuff with SOAR and XDR and all the other fun buzzwords that we have in the industry right now. So
yeah, buzzwords. Yeah.
Buzzword.
Yeah, no, like when you were working. Right? Like, I mean, I was just the other day, I was at a conference and someone up on stage from a vendor with some new acronym that they created. So, they could claim they were the leaders in that space because, well, they're the only ones because they're the only one that call it that. But I know you and I met back when you were doing like medical device stuff, and that was kind of your talk track. There was some like really fascinating stuff you were digging into there. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more and just a little bit more about that story if you're up for it.
Yeah. Like I said, I started out kind of in the regulatory space, and I think the first time I met you was at Circle City Con. Is that right? I think it was. Yeah, I think it was in Indianapolis, and that was the first time I remember meeting. That was only like the second time I'd ever talked, and the first time I'd ever given like a longer talk. So that was crazy. But yeah, just, I don't know, started diving into that and trying to figure out why people are attacking these things. And I think it's expanded a little bit into kind of the greater infrastructure picture now. It's okay, why are people attacking different aspects of critical infrastructure, healthcare being one of them? But I'm definitely excited. I've got a couple devices like sitting behind me on the shelf right there that I want to mess around with more a little bit, learn a little bit more on the hardware side of things as well. And just, it's amazing out there. I mean, just digging into some of the research that's been done previously on medical devices, there's plenty that have had like hard coded credentials or just ports that shouldn't be open, things like that, that are just, you're sitting there like, wow, this is security 101. And why are we putting these in people's bodies, you know?
Yeah, it's scary stuff. I mean, so often I think in security, like we can look at it when we're dealing with the business or anything else, and maybe when they're getting upset or there's an incident, it's like, well, okay, it's not life or death. No one's going to die because, we got breached or, we've got this thing, but we're entering this phase more and more now where it is life or death, or at least it has really significant implications on the real world when we think about ransomware attacks against pipelines, against hospitals. It's moved beyond just even targeted necessarily against medical devices. And I remember when we had Barnaby Jacks was still around and the work he was doing, and some of the storyline telling about medical devices back then already, and it's really evolved since.
Yeah, and luckily I think that I think it's becoming more, people are becoming more aware, and luckily I think we're catching up as far as the security side of thing goes, which is good. I've seen medical devices and just medicine in general has expanded so much over the last few decades, and I think we're finally realizing, oh, okay, maybe the technology, the security side of it should have maybe expanded with that as well. So we're getting there.
We just need more buzzwords. That's all. We got to create new things. We don't have enough buzzwords yet. If we have more buzzwords, that will solve the problems.
We have to decide what the buzzword of the year is going to be. I think that should be our job.
Oh my gosh. We'll have to have that conversation privately because I don't want to beat up on any poor vendors live there, because I love vendors. Vendors get us products that we do need to do our jobs, but God, they also do some really bizarre things sometimes.
Definitely. I love that shirt that you shared where you said, yes, I have purchasing authority, but no, I don't want to hear about your product. And I was like, okay, I really need one that just says, no, I don't have purchasing authority. I really want to just put that in my email signature at this point.
It's I mean, unfortunately, yeah, you put titles, and LinkedIn has become the space that they love to discover people to harass, right? Like put a title in your profile, director or anything that, like, oh gosh,
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a role like that. I'm a systems engineer, so I don't know why people think I have purchasing authority, but I am definitely at the bottom of the totem pole.
So she gets really, really humble about the things that she does. Because if you don't know, you've done some incredible freaking work. So you really stuff over. Can you talk about that at all?
I'm sorry, you cut out there a little bit.
Yeah. It's like on a Zoom meeting. No, during COVID, you were doing some stuff outside of the cybersecurity space that was actually really impressive. And I don't know if you're willing to share some of that, but I think you were kind of like on the front lines of a lot of this.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was living in Connecticut, I was part of the Connecticut Med Reserve Corps, which was really cool because we did a lot of the first vaccinations for people. A lot of the vaccine clinics that you kept seeing pop up everywhere, we were organizing those, doing logistics for those, getting doctors and nurses on board to administer vaccines. I mean, there were times when we had to pull veterinarians in to give vaccines because the need for vaccines was so great in that area. But I was also I'm part of an institutional biosafety committee because of my background, and we review any studies that involve any recombinant genetic products. So anything that has like re-engineered DNA or RNA or anything along those lines, we review those. So got to work hands-on with some of the vaccines that are being used now, and that was a really cool place to be during the pandemic, because I kind of got to feel like the things that I was doing were directly helping people.
That's super cool. So I'm curious, did you like have any overlap then with that work and kind of your cybersecurity expertise? I mean, I realized that was not at all the focus of what you were doing in that work, but did you find any overlaps there?
A little bit. Honestly, a lot of it kind of went into the social engineering realm as far as looking into different attacks, and a lot of like phishing attacks and stuff like that started using COVID as kind of as their way in and things like that. And I think that kind of having the understanding of what was going on in the medical industry and also understanding what people were trying to do in cybersecurity was helpful. Unfortunately, I didn't get to use a ton as far as like helping with the logistics as far as security goes. We didn't have like any sophisticated networks or anything along those lines, but got to help a little bit with some of the phishing stuff, and just it gave me a really good understanding of the supply chain and how cybersecurity affects that as well.
Side of things focus to find yourself like that, just that key person in the room or whatever, like so many of us. I realized I just broke up there again.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I mean, did you find yourself like being like that IT person in the room, like, you know, like when you're like with your family, like you're always IT support for the family? Did you run into that, like where you had to explain some of this to maybe some of the biomed folks who didn't really understand that side of it?
Definitely. Yeah. And there's definitely been times in like biosafety meetings too, where because a medical device can also be an app. A lot of the apps that you see on like your iPhone or even your Apple Watch, things like that, if they're collecting like telemetry or any sort of data from the human body, it has to be reviewed by the FDA. And so it's been interesting to kind of have that overlap, because there's definitely been times where we had studies to review and there was technology involved where they were like, I don't really understand this, because I'm sitting in a room of people with like MDs and PhDs and sometimes both, but like they're just not tech people. And that's been the one place where I'm like, oh, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about on the medical side of things, but I can tell you about what they're doing with this. So that has definitely been a saving grace, and it's been super helpful. And then yes, being tech support too, even at the clinics and stuff like that, when they had issues with like some of the patient registration software and stuff like that, they were like, hey, you know computers, right? And you know how that goes. So
I mean, but it's an opportunity again, right? I mean, you get to educate some people on some things, you know, again, not your focus to be looking at, you know, maybe security or even privacy aspects of these technologies, but now you're in that moment where, okay, that wasn't my focus, but maybe I can still influence some people to understand some of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So that's cool. So now you've changed roles and you're into, you know, this new role you mentioned. You're doing stuff with SOAR, and I'm curious how that experience has been, as now you've got this, you know, some of these, I don't want to call them new concepts, they've been around for a while, but these concepts are sort of seem to be gaining traction. And, you know, how has that been? What is your experience? I mean, are people receptive to that, or where do you find, I guess, the biggest challenges with that?
They're definitely receptive. I think so. Dealing with SOAR, and I mean, so like I said, I work for NetWitness, so we do, and like I said, the big buzzword right now is XDR. So we do network detection and endpoint detection and things like that, and just it's one of those products that's out there. But it's been really interesting, number one, because I'm in more of a client-facing role than I have been in the past, which has been really different for me, but it's been awesome in a lot of ways because I like talking to people. But number two, yeah, there's been some really interesting challenges. And I think I'm lucky that I had the background in cloud that I did, because I think that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing now. There's a lot of people that want to do cloud things, but aren't ready to like make that entire dive into cloud. So they're like, hey, can we do something like half and half or hybrid or things along those lines? And that's really, I think, where a lot of the challenges is. There's a lot of buzzwords swirling around right now, and people are trying to figure out how to apply those things to their environment and kind of where to split that balance between new and old.
Help see where security opens up doors for them in that cloud transformation, if you will. I mean, you kind of mentioned people are trying to go to cloud, but they don't really, maybe there is some tendencies there. Are you able to, use kind of the security story to help open that up?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, it really depends also like on what their infrastructure looks like and what their end goal is. There's definitely some cases that don't make sense to put in the cloud just yet. And there's other times where it's like, yeah, I mean, putting everything in the cloud would make total sense. So, I mean, it's definitely dependent on use case. It's been really interesting, like I said, being client facing as well, because I'm getting to actually talk to all these different people about what they're feeling about the cloud or their current environment or some of this technology that's out there. And it's been really interesting feedback.
Cool. Or really vendor as a reseller, there's kind of this sense in the industry. People are very, I think we've had so many charlatans and whatnot that are, and all the buzzwords and things that come up. Do you find yourself ever having to overcome some of that and like, you can trust us, we're actually decent people, we're trying to do the right things? How's your experience making that change into that? Have you found some of that so far?
You cut out a little bit in there, but basically from what I get, it's been an uphill battle in some ways, kind of trying to convince people, hey, we're trying to help you do the right thing and not just trying to sell you every buzzword in the book. But yeah, I guess it has been a little bit of an uphill battle in that sense.
So what have you been able to find so far that's overcome?
I'm sorry, I missed all of that.
Of course. Wisconsin, please. Hey, Verizon, if you could put in some towers, it'd be great right now. My gosh. No, I was just curious, like, what have you found that's helped you to kind of, how do you connect with those people, or what are you able to do to kind of help people understand that they can trust you?
Just really trying to understand the issue. And this is interesting because I've actually found a lot of parallels between, I was a mechanic in college. I think we talked about this before, but it's kind of the same way with car stuff. I mean, when someone comes in and they've got car issues that they need someone to fix, they're always a little bit mistrustful. They don't want people to just sell them a bunch of stuff that they don't need. And I mean, there's definitely a reputation in the automotive industry that everyone's going to try and upsell things. And like nobody seems to be trustworthy. And I think I learned a lot from that, just kind of understanding people, telling them, hey, this is what you need. I'm not going to try and sell you a bunch of stuff you don't need, or being super honest when people ask about things, saying, hey, is this something I should use, or this something I should be doing? And saying, no, this is not going to work for you based on what you've got, or this is not something you need right now. I think when you're honest with people and you can kind of tell them, hey, like show them, hey, I'm not going to try and sell you everything under the sun, that it becomes a lot easier for them to be like, oh, okay, like this person's actually trying to help me. And like I said, it was kind of similar in the car industry. Like people would come in and be like, So you're not gonna like try and sell me a bunch of like radiator flushes and stuff like that? And I'd be like, no, you don't need that right now. Like let's focus on the, the back end of your car that's falling off. So
well, and it's so frustrating because we realize that it's not, it's other people who have done that, right? These people have experienced that before, or they've heard from others who have experienced that before. And so when it's our own peers that are doing that damage, creating that distrust, that's really problematic. And we'll go there because I feel like it's something I think we need to discuss because and I can't think of anyone better to discuss this with than you. We've had a perfect example of that just in this past week, and it's an ongoing situation, but we've got, a member of our cybersecurity community, I guess we can call them that, who has been called on the carpet multiple times for, I guess, what I would term dubious research at best that has been widely socialized to the point that it's shown up in mainstream media. It's getting communicated to people who don't, know any better, people, if you will. So I'm curious to know what I'm talking about, but for those of you that haven't been on the Twitter sphere, maybe that, and I don't know yet, and I don't know where am I here? Am I really here? No, clearly not.
okay, you're back.
I'm back.
You're back.
This is going to be the most stressful episode of this show ever. I'm sorry,
okay.
folks.
We'll get through it. It's all good.
So what I really want to do, so for those of you that have somehow missed this, there is a member of our community. His first name's Jonathan. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. But,
who's the same as one of the property brothers.
Right. There you go. But so he releases this paper, and it's attacking research that was done, legitimate, deep research that had been done that, looking into a ransomware situation. And he comes in with a lot of this information claiming that their research is faulty. And since then, people have jumped in and shown why his debunking of their research is actually the faultiness. So I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I know you have a lot of them, and I think it's something that we have to start discussing more openly.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with questioning research. I think that's how we find new ideas and figure out fallacies that have been accepted in the past. However, I think it's also very important to admit when you're wrong and not double down and start fights with every single person that has questions as to how you did your research, what your methods are, things like that. It's not a personal attack. It's literally people trying to learn things and make sure that the correct information is getting out. So it's one of those things where I don't think necessarily at the beginning it was a huge problem, although I have to say I didn't read the paper. I really should go back and do that. But yeah, questioning things isn't bad, but there is a certain grace to admitting when you're wrong and accepting new information that kind of comes into your worldview. And when you double down on everything and pick fights with people and just don't accept, other explanations or things that make sense, then it becomes a personal issue and not necessarily an industry issue.
Well, this is why I thought it would be great because of the research aspect. You have a lot of background in research. I mean, obviously, the work that you've done, you've been in those spaces. And, you said it, it's good to question research. But if you're going to jump into that fray, then you also have to be good with people questioning yours as well. And I think that's one of the key issues that's happening here. And unfortunately, the way it plays out is that we see, what I would classify as nothing short of misinformation that goes out. And now, where you had some research that was done and, was really aimed at trying to understand a situation and, be able to address it in terms of the users who were attacked, the types of attacks that were being used and why. Now suddenly you've got this contrarian voice that, based on what we're seeing, was maybe using some pretty dubious techniques to try to debunk, as he put it, this research. And, that's where I think it becomes a real challenge, especially if you're going to, immediately shut down and personally attack people who question your methods or point out fallacies or issues in your methods.
Yeah, if you're going to question research, you have to expect that somebody is going to come back and question your research. It's just how it goes. Like, if you're going to sit there and question someone, people are going to come back and question you. That's how it happens. But, oh man, I just totally lost my train of thought. But
well, I mean, I'll play off of this then. I mean, we've, I think in a lot of spaces, I was just talking with somebody about this today, and I'm working on a pilot's license right now, and or excuse me, pilot certificate. I'm sorry, FAA. I understand it is no longer a license; it's a certificate. But no, seriously, I was just talking with a colleague today about the way that the NTSB and the FAA investigate crashes, and to seek understanding and to try to find new ways to address not just necessarily issues of the plane, right? Okay, if something is a failure on a plane, we get it. We see, this part is prone to wearing out prematurely or whatever, needs to be inspected. That we get. But the way that they seek to really understand the decision-making process and that Swiss cheese model of all of the bad things that have to occur in just the right way for, this accident to occur. And I feel like, what you mentioned as far as research, and especially as it pertains to cybersecurity, to get to that same level, we need to be willing to have those same conversations openly and discuss each other's research in a way that seeks to find the truth, rather than necessarily just seeking to amplify one's own prevalence in the community or whatever.
Yeah, and misinformation is so harmful. I mean, the thing that I always think back to is, do you remember the article with the guy who claims that vaccines cause autism? I mean, how many times that was retracted because it was not factually true? And how many times do you still see people using that as an excuse? And it's just one of those things where information at this point with this technology that we have spreads like wildfire, whether it's correct or incorrect information. And honestly, I just saw a study because I'm writing a paper right now on disinformation, or an article on disinformation, and it as a cybersecurity threat. And I think it was wrong information is shared 67% more often than correct information, or something along those lines. MIT did a study. So like, wrong information is literally shared more than correct information. It spreads faster for some reason.
Well, and honestly, it makes sense to me in some regard, because when you look at the way disinformation most often comes up, it's designed to speak to a story or a narrative that somebody wants to believe, right? I mean, it's ultimately crafted to elicit an emotional response and to drive actions based off an emotional response. I mean, it's propaganda. That's what we do with propaganda. How do we, play off of somebody's emotions? So regular news that's actually real is boring by comparison, because it doesn't always get us emotionally excited. And so when someone decides to craft some, false narrative about, using ivermectin to cure COVID or whatever the heck else, oh my gosh, I can speak to people's, I can get people to like my story just by, playing off of their emotions. So, I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. And I think, we do the same thing in cybersecurity. I mean, I think about when we talk about, ATPs and how excited we get about ATPs, or worse yet, attribution to ATPs, when we don't really have a story. So I'm curious, the work that you're doing right now on misinformation as it pertains to cybersecurity, where do you see that?
You cut out again a little bit, but did you say where do you see that going, or where do you see that?
Yeah, where do you see it going from your research?
It's been an interesting journey. My master's degree that I'm working on is in cybersecurity and global affairs. So I've gotten a lot of education in the last, I just finished my first year of my master's degree and gotten a lot of education on things that I didn't know before, because while I have a pretty good grasp on cybersecurity, I don't have a whole foreign affairs background. So it's been really interesting. And that's why I got a little bit more interested in some of the disinformation, because I had entire classes that talked about it at times, and was curious as to whether there was, disinformation should be essentially considered a cyber threat, just like malware and ransomware and things along those lines, because we're at the point where it is causing that much damage. False narratives, things that are calculated and released, they've been growing like crazy since COVID started, but I think at this point it should be considered part of the attack surface, false information, because it's very much like social engineering. Essentially is social engineering. It's catering towards the human side of cybersecurity, and that's where we see a lot of errors, because we're human. So I think I'm definitely going to start pushing for that a little bit more. I'm curious as to some of the ways that we can consider that more of the attack surface, and then also the ways to mitigate it. It's really hard to mitigate disinformation, because short of having someone literally go through and fact check everything, it's really tough. So there have been quite a few, and that's kind of the portion of the research I'm on now, is some of the mitigations. And there's been a lot of suggestions on scalable machine learning and things like that will be able to eventually detect misinformation or disinformation, things along those lines. And I think that's completely fascinating. That's a little bit out of my realm of understanding, but
So now we're bringing it full circle. We talked about buzzwords before, and some of the what I call stupid vendor tricks. And again, don't get me wrong, I have so many great security products out there, but there is a temptation there of, think about when you're going to market a product. It's some of the same thing that I just talked about with propaganda. You're trying to some degree, use somebody's emotional response to motivate them to buy your product. And that's where I think we fall into maybe a shady line. All right, if we take that too far and sensationalize this, do we actually end up as security vendors who are trying to make the world better and unintentionally actually making us less secure?
Yeah, there's definitely a fine line. You cut out at the very end, but yeah, no, there's definitely a fine line between making things less secure and kind of allowing for that human error, I think. So I did want to mention that the comment that popped up at the bottom of the screen that we didn't address yet, I just wanted to kind of circle back and say, yes, I agree. I think it is, if you're basing criticisms on the fact that somebody does not have a college degree or whatever level of education that they have, then you're in the wrong. And that's not the way that things should be. Some of the smartest people I know have not been to college, and there are people that I know that have gone to school for years and they no. So I don't think it has anything to do, and especially in this industry. This is one of the industries where you don't have to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree to do well. There are so many people that like haven't finished school and they're light years ahead of where I will ever get in my career. So it's neat to be in one of those industries that allows for that. We're kind of breaking that mold of needing a college degree for everything. But I definitely agree. It's not okay to attack people based on their level of education, and especially in this industry, that's not something we should be doing.
Well, no, and especially in an industry where ultimately our job is to educate others. This is one of our jobs as far as like training, all things, figuring the latest greatest thing. But the ability to educate really makes us good at our job. So when you can't have mature conversations like that, I think that's where we see an issue as well. I want to throw it to you time actually to, if there was one thing you would love to see security people do differently, do that education.
Oh no, I lost
that you'd like to see change. Yeah, am I back?
You're back. I think I got most of that. So one thing I'd like to see people in security do differently or change, essentially.
Yep.
I don't know. That's a tough one to answer on the fly. I'm gonna have to think about that. But I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just the gatekeeping. I think that for the most part, especially on Twitter and stuff like that, most people are generally very excited to share the things that they do and educate others. But every time I log on, I see these posts where people are like, oh, you can't do security unless you do this, or this is the way you have to do it. And there's no perfect journey. And I think people need to understand that security is one of those areas that touches every single industry. And it's not something where you can say, oh, this is the exact way you have to take it. No, you can come in from any industry, really, because we need people with interest and knowledge in different industries in order to make things secure and kind of reach our end. We all have the same end goal. I don't know why we're gatekeeping.
And that really does seem to we seem to specialize in that a little bit, I think, in this industry of expecting everybody to kind of go at things the same way, and that's actually problematic. So let's take a look at this question. There's a question from Ken coming in. So healthcare has such a wide range of capabilities, from large, small manufacturers, HDOs. I started in commercial aviation, and Boeing, Airbus are skilled systems integrators. There is no equivalent in healthcare. Hospitals are all self-integrators. How do we help build better integration capability in the security space? Ooh.
That is probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked. Oh my gosh. Oh man. I mean, I guess I have a new business idea now, right?
I mean, truly.
I agree. There needs to be some sort of integration capability and some sort of bottom line for everyone to follow, because it's definitely, there's some hospitals that I've been in that are like, wow, okay, they've got it together. This is awesome. And then there's others where there's Post-it notes with the admin password on every computer and everything's left unlocked, and you're just like, as a security person, I don't want to have surgery here anymore. I think I'll go somewhere else. So I really don't know the right answer to that. And that's something that I think I want to think on a little bit more. I agree that, I mean, the end of that, I guess, is I agree. There needs to be something. I just don't know what the right solution is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can say all I've seen in this space is attempts by, VARs to kind of try to play that role. I used to work for one that was really heavy in healthcare, and I know they really wanted to do that. But at the end of the day, that I feel like that's a case where we as security folks could probably be better in how we communicate with the healthcare space, in particular, because I think we go in there expecting to approach it like we would approach any technology organization. And anyone who's spent any time working in the healthcare space, and Gabby, I know you obviously you understand this because you've been there. I've been there as well. The motivations, everything is so very different. Not only just because it's life and death, but how we go about, just addressing healthcare, and the overlap that it has to technology is so different than how we see technology integrate into other industries, like, say, financial services or even manufacturing or anything like that. It's just such a different world. So, I mean, Ken, to your point, I think where we have to begin is, we really have to understand as cybersecurity professionals that world very differently, because I don't feel like we do have a good understanding of that today. And, I think I think you've brought up a really good point, that it's probably a space that is not well served today. And even when we look at massive massive EMR, thank you. Brain's flying here. You look at these massive EMR providers, and it's only so far they can go, because there's just so much technology there to integrate that. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap and I appreciate you suffering through this connection. That is what I'm able to find here in the dark reaches of the universe. But I'll be back on planet Earth next week with another great guest. But in the meantime, thank you all for tuning in. And I do apologize for the technical issues. I know it's been a rough one, but we'll be back to normal next week. And we'll be here every week, like we always are on Securing Bridges. So be sure to tune in, check out the podcast versions of past episodes, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all for joining. See you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Securing Bridges podcast with Alyssa Miller. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.